Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I have to say this is our third one of these. It's going to be a little different tonight, and I'll explain that. But this is the biggest crowd we've had yet, so I'm pleased about that. What we envision for tonight, we've been calling it a forum. It's not a meeting. It's certainly not a hearing. This is supposed to be informal, and we're going to get people up to speed in case you're not. But the idea tonight is that we're going to talk together as a community, informally. The four of us are here as the Board of Trustees, but we're also here as your fellow residents. And because this is the most important issue that any of us are going to think about, and people have strong feelings as they ought to, just for some ground rules, please raise your hand. I will acknowledge you. And I'd like to moderate it as much as you can. Try and address us. If we get into a lot of back and forth, we'll let that go because I want this to be informal. I want it to be a conversation, but I will reserve the right to sort of keep this structured, and I hope you'll all participate in that, and so we can have the best conversation possible. So, if you haven't heard, maybe a better way to do this is, raise your hand if you were at either the first or second presentations on these reports. Okay, so I know a lot of these faces have been coming back. So, if you weren't, who's watched it on the internet, through the website, something like that, good. So, is there anyone who has no idea what we're talking about tonight? Okay, good, that's good. So, I don't want to bore you with what you already know, but just generally speaking, our water and sewer systems are 80 years old, and I think all of us know that we have been facing this moment for many years. Water main breaks, water comes out of your tap, doesn't look right. There are other problems we've had that maybe you don't know about, times when the sewer plant was handling too much water, too much material, that kind of thing. So the details obviously are in these reports, but we are here because we have to address this stuff. We have to make huge capital improvements in this infrastructure. And the next question is, who's going to do that? The village or the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority? Now, so there's sort of two things. Is there anyone who wants to say we don't need to fix our water and sewer systems? I'd love to hear from you, right? We're all agreed. We know we're looking at this with open eyes. Great. So I would like to, this is sort of the last time, okay? We've been talking about this since about April. The reports have been out. We've had lots of opportunities to hear from you. I still wish more residents, to my feeling, had been paying attention. I'm so grateful you're all here, but you do represent a small portion of this village. So if you think your neighbor across the street has been missing out on this, please tap him on the shoulder and tell him about it. With that said, I don't have a real structure. I would like it to be a loose forum, ask questions. We have been studying this, and I think we might be able to answer a lot of your technical questions. What's the water authority? How could Tivoli do it on our own? I just want to kind of open it up and leave it like that. Is there anything else from the board? Because I think we've already had those other meetings which present the information that's really about what are we going to do. So with that said, thank you again for being here, and let's talk, Tivoli. Vince.
What's the deadline?
There is no deadline. We can make this decision as slowly as we want. We can, so I guess the deadline is more if we transfer to the water authority. They're going to be sitting there, and they're not, we don't have to do this year, next year. I think if there's any time sensitivity, it's just the infrastructure itself. So it's kind of like the longer we wait, the later we will begin repairs, right? But there is no deadline in that sense. Hayden.
So it seems that just knowing nothing, that having the county do it would be advantageous, because I'm assuming that the village does not have, well, like $9-10 million to do this.
Right.
So what would be, I guess, some of the hurdles or drawbacks of having the county do it as opposed to?
Sure. So the way you frame that question raises a couple points I just want to clarify. So, and if I skip some, chime in, please. So first of all, the entity that might, or that we have the option of transferring these systems to is called the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority. It is not per se Dutchess County. That is something that is a little hard to keep straight. They are a not-for-profit public benefit corporation. They were established in 1991 by an act of the county legislature, who had to go to New York State to say, please establish an authority in Dutchess County. And in the early 90s, the county legislature looked out at this county, looked at the several hundred water and wastewater systems, municipal, public, private, big, small, and said, wow, in 10, 20, 30 years, these are all going to start needing massive work, failing. Many, there are also many private, say a water system in a development, and the developer builds it, puts the stuff in the ground, leaves. The homeowners in that development have an association, and they're responsible for maintaining it. And when they think they're not up to it, they can hand it to the DCWWA. So that was the first part. And then about the $10 million, the $9.5 million, that figure comes from financial estimates in these reports. That's largely capital projects, and that number is primarily, every piece of hardware in our systems, from the treatment plant, hydrants, water mains, the tower, gets a price tag based on its condition, and that's how they came up with that number. No one's going to come up with that money except us, the users of the system. So regardless of who is in control of the systems, whether it's the village or the DCWWA, the users are going to pay for the water. So there are several ways that we can pay for the water. You can bond, you can just borrow the millions of dollars you need to, say, replace a water tower or expand a treatment plant. There are also low interest loans from the state. There are zero interest loans from the state and other agencies. There are grants. And then there's your quarterly bill. So some combination of all that is how Tivoli is going to come up with this $9.5 million over the coming years. And then your last part was the advantages. Well, maybe we'll come back to that in a bit as we can talk about it, because I'm not sure everyone agrees on the pros and cons on either side. But yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm going a little bit with this. It's understanding that we're going to pay for it regardless of who oversees the operation of our system, our infrastructure.
Yes.
And also the process for assigning what, because I'm sure the water authority doesn't have unlimited resources.
Correct.
What gets done when, and prioritizing all that would be in their hands, not in our hands.
Right. So either party, the village or the authority, I'm going to just call them the authority for the rest of the night because that's a long name to rattle off every time. Both of us would go off of these reports. That's pretty well established. These reports took 18 months. It was an $80,000 report paid for by a county grant. And they break it out into categories A, B, and C. A is 0 to 5 years, 6 to 10, and 11 to 20. And so the things that are urgent regardless of who's running it. So I think the sort of to-do list is the same. However, if we transfer, in many senses, we are giving up control.
That's what I was getting at.
Yes.
But the 0 to 5 is the bulk of the capital expense. There will be additional expenses in years 5 to 10 and 11 to 15, but pretty much that $9 million is going to be spent right away because the issues that we're dealing with are critical. The water tower, for example, the Department of Health spoke to us 5 years ago about the need to replace or repaint it. The repainting the interior requires lead abatement, so part of the issue that this report dealt with was what was the most cost-effective way to deal with that water tower issue, but it cannot be delayed. You'd be in trouble with the Department of Health.
Well, and also these reports are, you know, a condition assessment of everything, like every manhole cover, every fire hydrant, every light switch in the well houses. I mean, it is all in there, and it is all broken down in terms of like what needs to happen when. So, you know, it's pretty clear.
No, what I was referring more to as an example was we have a water break tomorrow, major, something happens. Town doesn't get up and do it, now the county would have to be alerted, the county would have to prioritize and get the manpower. Or if we're gonna, any changes that we're gonna make or anything, is gonna come from that end as the authority, and as opposed to, you know, the town doing it. 'Cause
Right,
we've been
so-
doing it for how long? 80 years?
The village?
Yeah, we've been doing it for 80 years.
80 years, yeah.
We've been doing it for 80 years. Okay. We know the system inside and out. We need repairs, that we know. Now you're gonna hand it over, you gotta look at that end of it also.
Mhm.
When you hand it over, you're handing over the responsibility, but also, you know, your priorities may not be their priorities.
Actually, I'm going to beg to differ a little bit there because our priorities are indeed pretty in line with one another, and those are dictated by the reports that were generated. I mean, that's a very comprehensive assessment of the condition of every part of our water system, and a lot of it is compliance issues, but also quality of water issues that would have to be addressed, whether it's the authority that's actually
Exactly.
executing that or the village. So that I would say, you know, we've got the same blueprint and list of priorities that we'd be working off of.
I also think that some of the terminology you use is a great way to think about this. If you transfer, you give up control and responsibility. And I think, you know, those are sort of wed, and, you know, those are useful words to conceptualize this decision, yes. Okay, no one's leaving till everyone's gotten to talk, so please be patient. Ken?
Related question to that. So currently we have guys running that system. They know the system very well. They've done a good job of it with the resources they have. What happens to them?
A very good question. What happens to them in terms of, will they have a job?
Exactly. And it's to our benefit, I think, that they stick around, but also, you know, there's no reason for them not to stay around.
No, I can tell you from where I sit at the mayor's desk, I could keep those guys busy 40 hours a week without doing water sewer. And I think all of you can look around the village at various things that you wished we had gotten to. And, you know, we could have 4 or 5 personnel in the DPW to keep them busy. So they would not be losing any hours, that's for sure, or a job.
They'd still be with the village.
Yeah, and I think, you know, let's be candid. We've got Jimmy, who's been 35 years this year. And then we've got Cody and Ralph, who, you know, about 10 years and maybe 4 or 5 years. That's quite a spread. Now, we all love Jimmy to death. He's almost a saint, but he's not going to do this forever. And I think that, you know, when I have conversations with people, many people talk about that now and what is in his head when he retires, you know. So they would still have work. They would still have jobs. And there's another piece. In some situations where the authority has taken over a system, they either hire the existing people. I don't want them to take away my DPW because I need them for other things, but hire them as a consultant, say, if there's someone with that sort of institutional knowledge who has it, works with the county authority for the first, you know, 3, 4, 5 years. One example, the authority has taken over 8 water systems in the town of Hyde Park, and they ended up just hiring the people that were already working. Now, every case will be a little different, but that has happened.
So it won't be somebody's brother-in-law suddenly running the water system. Can we
Right,
imagine that?
and probably if it's in the hands of the authority, they're going to bid out for an operator, a water sewer operator. You know, there are companies, big and small, national companies, state-sized, county-sized, all sizes, who are professionals who are private companies who will run, you know, operate a sewer plant, operate a water plant, that kind of thing. Yes, ma'am?
Earlier you mentioned that we would lose control, and then this gentleman was talking about the possibility of something going wrong and the outside company doesn't come as quickly as our own people do.
The authority. I don't, you know, if they've got a water main tonight, they still have to come fix it, or they're losing money and losing time. It's, you know, I don't think it's gonna be, it's not like they wouldn't come for days. Now, Jimmy lives on Spring Street. I'm sorry?
Would that be illegal if they just let?
I'm sure it would. I mean, you know, the authority is a quasi-governmental agency, and they have all sorts of responsibilities to operate in the sunshine. They have public meetings. They have, you know, they can't be a slimy for-profit private company, right? So it's the responsibility part. They're gonna have to come fix it in the middle of the night. Yeah.
And they've been doing this for 26 years.
Yes. Valerie?
And would it also not be more likely or possible that they would have more manpower? So as opposed to us having to depend on 3 guys in the middle of the night, and not to, I don't know how they designate how many people are going to a site for repair. But say we have 3 and maybe they have 5.
Right, so,
I mean, they have I would guess they have a larger pool of people to work with.
so they have a full-time staff of 23. Obviously, as they pick up new systems, they have to add personnel. So they picked up Hyde Park and they hired the 5 people that were already working for Hyde Park. Yes, and I said this at our board meeting last night. In the last water main break earlier this month, on the 3rd night, when the guys had been out, overtime, cold, wet, hard work, psychically taxing, they're exhausted. And fortunately, before we had to do another day and another night, we found it. But as mayor and being responsible, I thought, I can't let these guys operate a backhoe at this point, or certainly not tomorrow. And that was a really scary moment to get to. I mean, if that had gone on, I would have said, you guys go home, and I'm gonna call in, you know, the next town over, and get some fresh people, because this is dangerous work, and they were spent. So yes, they have more people, but they would, I think they would get the right number of people for each system that they would add. The other thing they have is they have grant writers and administrators and office personnel. So we all have to understand that under current village control, it's me and us and Robin, our clerk, and Kristen, our deputy clerk, and the treasurer. We're doing what we can now, and it's a lot of work. Now, if we're gonna embark on 10 years of capital projects and chase millions and millions of dollars, I'll be honest with you, that's terrifying. Because the administration on the grant for Pine Street, that's $120,000, is a lot of work. It's a lot of administration. And, you know, I've been in this job 3 years, but I'm not a professional. There's not training, right? I mean, I'm here because I like Tivoli, but there's something to be said for professionals with that background.
And even with that job, we utilized an engineer to help us with the grant writing, help us to design the project, etc. So if we don't use the authority to do this, we will have to engage an engineering company to help us do this.
Karen?
I have 2 things. As soon as that meeting, the last meeting was over, the newspaper articles came in. There's one, Rosendale received a $925,000 grant from the State Clean Water Infrastructure Improvement Act for their reed beds and their sewer and treatment plant. Rhinebeck, right down the road, plans to bond a $3.74 million to replace water lines. And it says in the article that their line breaks about 6 times a year over the past 10 years, and their infrastructure is 100 years old. And they are trying to move on through that too. The bond is to replace the water lines. And they hope to get another $2.1 million under the state water infrastructure improvement. Red Hook has been awarded $3.2 million by the state to put water and sewer projects to bolster their business district and reduce costs for residential property owners. These people have not even mentioned going with the authority. You make it sound like we can't do it.
I'm not trying to say we can't do it.
But they must have made their own grants.
These are exactly the sorts of funding streams that this community needs to go chase.
Right.
I know all of this, I know these, congratulations to our friends in Red Hook, absolutely. Did you want to speak to that?
Well, I would
couldn't
just
tell if that was
say,
a
so
hand.
I'm a town board member, I'm not on the village board, I just want to make that clear, but I work closely with Brent, who did a lot of the grant writing for the village project. I would just say that anytime I talk to them about like, hey, let's go in on a new website together, or hey, let's do this other project together, it's almost always, we're so focused on infrastructure, we have no time for anything else.
Right.
So that's all I would say, I don't have a dog in this fight or whatever,
And it's not the first time Tivoli's had to do that.
Totally,
We've got
I'm just saying that
grant money for
the
that.
village has been very lucky with getting grants and they've put a ton of work into
Actually,
it.
I don't think luck had anything.
Not
to do
luck,
with
but
it.
you know what I mean. They've put in a lot of work.
I know on that
A ton of work.
particular grant, the 3 point, they spent 3 years chasing that.
Right.
And they tried and lost 5 years before. So
But that's what grants
it
are.
wasn't their first
Sure.
effort.
Yeah.
Now, my question, do you put a value on our sewer and water plant? I mean, is it a multi-million-dollar plant that we have with the sewer plant and the water wells and all that? I mean, because when I think about value, the thing probably that disturbs me the most is that we're going to give that up, just give it away, never have a say on it after we've done that. We can't get it back. And we know for a fact that they do hire a lot of people down there to do their jobs. And their salaries are a lot more than what we pay our people. Without a doubt, I mean, there's going to be a cost. We're going to absorb it no matter what, whether we do it or the authority does it.
That's
And
true.
you can't convince me it's going to be that's going to be cheaper going with them.
It's not gonna be cheap.
Well,
You said a bunch of, go ahead.
Unless you know something I don't know.
well, I mean, the report, the feasibility study shows that, whether we go with the authority or not.
But there are administrative fees, Emily, too.
Right, but we're gonna be making that up because we're not gonna have Jimmy going around reading the meters for a couple of days a month. We're not gonna have Robin spending, how long taking care of the office end of it. I think it balances out.
But why aren't these villages going into it?
That's their choice.
There are no villages in it. The town of Hyde Park is,
Sure.
but they are mostly developments, I believe, housing developments that can't run their own.
Yeah, I think, some people pause on, that's a town system, that's a village system, that's a private, subdivision system. I think that is not a good way to think of it. A water system's a water system, a sewer system's a sewer system. It's about source, distribution, supply. And as far as fixing it, doesn't matter whether it's public or private, the pipes are the pipes.
Right.
So, on the value though, and this is just my opinion, I mean, obviously, we can find out exactly what our system is worth in dollars and cents, but that's not what you were asking.
No, not really.
What's the value? Well, I hope you all feel this way as residents, and as your mayor, I feel the value is this community needs to have reliable, dependable water and sewer. That's the value. And value is different than cost, we all understand that, right? When I look at the, coming decades of Tivoli, and I think, no water, no Tivoli, right? We all get that. No sewer. I mean, if you had septic tanks, you couldn't have Furrow Avenue. You couldn't have that sort of nice, dense communal village that we have. You wouldn't have the room for it. So value for me, since I'm here right now and it's my job to lead this thing, I want to get Tivoli to where we're going to have dependable water and sewer.
We all want that.
Yes, good, okay. But we may disagree about the best way to get there.
But I would also note that Brent Kowalczyk has done yeoman service for the village of Red. We all know that. And he's been dogged and determined. He is an architectural engineer, at least an architect, so he has good knowledge of this. But he has worked hand in glove with, is it C.T. Mayo, who is the village engineer. So the village, it isn't a village trustee who has done this. It is a village trustee in conjunction with an outsourced engineer. And they have outsourced that engineer through competitive bidding, which the authority will do. They'll follow the same procurement rules. They will also hire an engineer to design and build whatever needs to be done. So the difference is whether you're having the 25 people at the DC authority who have knowledge of this process working with that engineering firm, or you have trustees and a mayor who are voted in every 2 years.
Gentleman in the back, did you have a? Yes, yes, sir.
I think everybody's in agreement that repairs need to be made. I think we're getting lost in the fact of who's going to do the work and who's going to be in control of the system. I think everybody agrees that, yes, the engineer report says this needs to be replaced and that needs to be replaced, and we all know that. I think the big question is, are we going to keep control ourselves or outsource it to somebody else? It's a foregone conclusion to me that repairs need to be made. I think we should try to focus more on who's going to actually affect those repairs.
I agree. I think that's where the conversation needs to go. Alex?
So I take it that you're going to make an agreement with the authority of some sort. And in that agreement, there'll be safeguards about our happiness about their response and their work. And there'll be ways in which we can have some, to work out whether if we're not happy with it, how do we get them to work better?
Right.
And even if we get down the road 3 or 4 years and we want to get out of the agreement, is there a way to do that? Or
Yeah, you don't get out once you go in.
Okay.
So
how do you make sure that we're happy with their response, with their performance?
So, it's not the same as voting directly for people like us, that's for sure. I mean, there's no question that were we to transfer, you give up some control. And maybe a lot of control, however you want to say it. So if we go that route, there's a transfer agreement. This is like a legal document. It's kind of like when you're selling a house, both parties hammer out a deal. It's iterative, it goes back and forth, and you say, no, we want this, no, we want that. Maybe we want a say over what the water tower is going to look like, for example. That gets written in, and then it's a legal document they have to follow. Another option is to have like a village steering committee. So if you go to the authority and in the transfer agreement, it says there will be a steering committee, it'll have 8 people, it'll have, the mayor, a trustee, and 6 residents appointed, blah, 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 that work with the water authority to guide, their choices, say, about a water tower. And it's, I can hear someone say, there's going to be an advisory committee. Well, they don't have to listen to an advisory committee. Well, you do and you don't. I mean, ultimately, no, but I think in an open quasi-governmental agency, they're going to feel the pressure and they're going to be influenced, if not dictated to, right? That's a great eye roll. Did we get that one? Gerard?
Thanks, Joel. I'm a little bit confused, right? Does the authority have to be hired? Like, everybody's aware that there's a huge issue, it's a $10 million headache that has to be taken care of, right? But the authority has to be engaged before that work commences, or does the authority come in afterwards to take it over? Because to me, it doesn't make sense, it's two tiers of expense. Like, you're hiring somebody to oversee a brand new system who's going to hire people that have technically been laid off. Is that true? Or?
Right, so let me speak to that. That's a good point. So there are some things in these reports that were like red, like should have happened yesterday. We've already started some of that. That's what gets you in trouble with the sewage going into the stream, not properly treated. So, for example, we've already spent $50,000 this year to recoat our clarifier tanks. It's a series of tanks. The sewage moves through, gets treated by the bacteria, and goes out. So, but we would not be fixing it all ourselves and then handing it to them to run. And if there are advantages, and we can argue back and forth about pros and cons, I would posit that one of the advantages to giving it to the authority is that they're the ones who have to chase the money and oversee all these projects, and not us. I mean, if they weren't going to do that, then there's no decision, we should just keep it. One of the advantages is that they would be responsible for fixing all this stuff. Does that clear it up?
So basically, they're responsible for getting $10 million.
Yes.
Okay. But isn't that kind of a conflict for them?
How?
Well, if they're going to go out and say, well, we're in charge of the project, we're saying it's going to cost $15 million, because everybody knows that budgets never stay where they're set, right? So it's not really a $10 million project, it'll probably go up to 15.
Okay, so let me talk to that. If I don't answer, let me know. So these reports were done by a third party, an independent engineering firm, Ty and Bond, that we hired. We had 13 different firms fight to be able to do the report. So that those are their numbers. They're not coming from the authority. Secondly, there's a 20% contingency in every number in here, because we know how things come up. Our bridge is a perfect example of that. So
So we go up to $12 million, and that's the cap, basically.
well, I'm saying maybe it really costs 8, and they're saying it's 9.5, because they've got a 20% pad in these numbers, so that you don't end up with a surprise like it's 10. Whoa! Hopefully it's here, and you stay within your scariest number. Before I come to you, sir, I'll just take someone else. Yes, Phyllis?
I feel, especially after last week with the leak, that was really amazing, and I am so grateful that it got fixed, but I don't feel like we have time on our side. I have one question, which is, can you tell us more or less what that leak cost? We had to get
I was trying
trucks
to pull
with
numbers
water.
together for tonight.
Yeah.
We didn't have them all processed with overtime and everything, but I'm going to make a guess here. Let's see. We spent $4,000 bringing in water
Yeah,
to keep our tank, and then we had 3 full days of DPW plus overtime.
yeah,
We had a different contractor come in and dig. I'm thinking it's probably going to come out to 10 or 12 grand.
yeah. So, I feel like we can't wait any longer. I feel like to pretend that we have time to go, I mean, even you said something about, well, this might take a couple of years to get going, no matter which way we do this, but it feels like at the rate we're going already, that to try to get a citizens group that's knowledgeable enough to run this thing and to do all the paperwork, because that's gotten so complicated now. I mean, everything is just layers and layers of paperwork, and so it feels like to try to get some citizens group that's separate from you guys who are already busy, it feels unrealistic to me. It just doesn't feel like it's something that will actually happen, and so I don't feel like we have time. I feel like this has been going on for way too long, and we should have been addressing this 10, 15 years ago. And now we've waited and waited and waited, and we can't just sit around and say, well, maybe it should be this or that or whatever. We have to do something.
Let me just address her for a second.
Sure, Vince.
You have never done water systems or sewer systems, right? You don't know anything about
Hey,
the water.
Vince, you can speak to her point, but talk up here, talk to us. I don't want to get into a face-to-face, that kind of thing.
I'm just saying,
Sure.
she probably has never worked on a water system or understands a water system or a sewage system.
Raise your hand if you have. Okay. Yes, sir.
Person over their house.
All right, so you can turn around and put all brand new pipes in, and they're gonna break onto you. There's no guarantee on it. You can put them in today, 2 days later, it can break onto you.
I think you raise a good point, which is whenever these things get fixed, when these big capital projects get done, whoever's gonna do them, there needs to be a new culture of complete and successful maintenance, which this village has been unable to achieve. So it's not just like put it all in and we're done. You gotta put it all in, and you need an entity, be it us or them, who's going to then manage it better than we have for 80 years. Because you're right, the new stuff will rust and break too, and it only has a lifespan. Kathy?
Do we know what type of pipes the authority has installed in Hyde Park? And do we know what type of pipes the village of Red Hook is doing? I've read recently that the plastic pipes that, seem to be prevalent in installation these days hold a potential health hazard, that this is the new lead of our era. And I'm all for investing the money in new infrastructure that we need, but I just want to be sure that we're not going to invest in something that we're not assured is going to be healthful for us down the road.
I can't really speak to the materials of the pipes, either in what would happen here or
Most of the time they're steel.
or what's happened in other communities. I don't know, but
Yeah,
we
I can speak partly to the village of Red Hook. It is a different situation. They are establishing a sewer system where no sewer system existed before. So they're starting from scratch. They're not repairing the old system.
Sewage pipes are plastic.
Right.
That's what the sewers are. Your
Concern is the water.
your water lines are steel.
Well, in either situation, the water's tested, and, whether it's us or them, the health department is going to be watching the quality of the water and its safety. That's their job. Matthew?
Yeah, just a point on that. I asked the guys working on the bridge, since they live right there. And Lou said that they're both cast iron, both the sewer and the water pipe, they were cast iron. They were using plastic for the sewer temporarily and they had a steel pipe, but now they're using cast iron for both. So I just thought I'd tell you.
Thank you. Did you have another?
Yeah, no, just continuing with what our gentleman behind me was saying, is that the funding for this, and as the authority doesn't have $9 million or $10 million in their back pocket ready to pounce on this.
Nobody does.
Right, okay.
America doesn't.
So
We're not alone
what I'm
in
saying
this.
is, just because we hand the hot potato over to them, doesn't mean that the funding will magically appear. They have to do the grant stuff just like we would have to do, and all that stuff, and even though they have the manpower, which we would hire to do, because we wouldn't do it ourselves either,
Right.
okay? The money would come in when it comes in. Now, how we let's play devil, let's say we decide to do it ourselves, and we're gonna hire the writers to write out all the paperwork and do all of that good stuff. That money has to be, some of the money's gonna have to be recuperated. We have bonds, we have whatever, has to be paid out. We're still talking about, we would end up paying for it regardless.
Right.
Yes.
The users of the system, that's us.
That's us.
And so, yes, and grants are tempting, but more people lose grants than win them, right?
Yes.
So you might get it.
We don't have 5 or 10 years.
And back to Phyllis's point, maybe we don't have 3-4 years to chase this grant. If you were in that situation, I don't know. I'm gonna skip that terrible analogy I was about to say. If you didn't win the grant, well, then you're gonna go borrow. right? Because you need to fix it now, and that's, you borrow it and you have your interest, you know?
But that's the same
And that's-
for the authority too. They may
Absolutely,
not
the
get it.
funding streams are the same.
Right.
Same.
It's really who's gonna do all that work, right? Okay, Valerie and Hayden. and
But a
then-
quick question, in the proposal that the authority has given us, in their administrative costs, does that include their grant writers?
Yes.
They have a staff of grant writers, I'm assuming.
Mhm.
If we were needing to get grants, we would have to outsource to grants, which is not built in, I don't think, to our dollar amount.
No, it's an
So our
important,
dollar amount just for number is 10, and theirs is 10. But their 10 includes 2 for grant writers who are already on their staff.
Personnel
Our
that we don't
10
have.
Right, our 10 has to add another 2 to make up that difference.
yes. So an important thing that, for those of you who were here at one of the first 2 meetings when the engineer from Ty and Bond was here and explaining the format of these reports, these reports to get the Tivoli price, and you'll recall the costs were very even. I mean, they were within like $10 a quarter based on who was in charge, you know. The Tivoli model had certain assumptions. The assumption was you don't hire anyone else, which is a silly assumption. And then and we said, well, why did you assume that? You know we're gonna have to get a grant writer, an administrator, and a project manager, and engage engineers more. Why weren't those numbers built in? And the answer was because at a meeting like this, when you hold it up and you say it's gonna cost X, there's gonna be some people who say, but we'll save money by not hiring those people, we'll do it ourselves. So that's the report you get, the do-it-ourselves report, because you can't break it down any further. So it's the only one you can stand on. And I think, as much as that may seem silly, it's actually the right choice for the format of the report, because we can't break that down any further. And if we had plugged in those other personnel that we would hire, it's harder to get a clear number, you know? Hayden?
That's what I was gonna say.
You mentioned something about the authority bidding out, I guess, a contract to
An
a private
operator.
company to actually do the physical work of it. And so I'm wondering, one, I guess, who maybe some of those companies are, and how we'd ensure that we wouldn't get kind of crappy work done, because as is the case with like a lot of like roads, is that they go to the lowest bidder, and so we get garbage roads
Right.
filled with potholes after 6 months. And I guess I have a follow-up, is that who would the village potentially contract out to? Would it be like the same companies?
Well, there are myriad companies who are water sewer operators, as I said, big and small, around the country, around the state. I'm not familiar with any myself, because we have a municipal in-house operator, Jimmy. And there are municipalities who don't do their own water sewer, and they hire an operator, you know, to work for them. That's pretty common. And a municipality or the authority, you know, say you're gonna, okay, we need a water sewer operator. You put out the, you know, request for proposals. Different companies compete and bid. Hopefully you take the lowest responsible bidder, right, to avoid the bad roads you're talking about. And then you do that every so often, maybe 2 years, 3 years. You're not gonna, you know, get into bed with one company and keep them for 20 years so they can get lazy and stop doing a good job, right? I think most people, I don't know what the best time frame would be, but it's probably every 3 years they reissue the request for proposals. Yeah. Sorry, go
I
ahead,
was
Susan.
gonna say, you know, that the DC Water Authority has a board, which includes representatives of the county government, as well as some other individuals. So the authority is responsible to that board. It's a not-for-profit, public benefit corporation. If it gets a reputation for doing slovenly work, that board, it is going to be upset. So it's not that they have no responsibility to anyone, it is that they're not a profit-making organization. So the responsibility that the entity that they report to is this board of governors. And they don't grow as an entity unless they do a good job for the users.
Ma'am, you've been waiting quite a while.
No, that's what I was gonna ask. If the village were to take this on, you would certainly hire grant writers, you would hire a project engineer. And so I was gonna ask if that was already in that price, but you
It's not.
answered.
Right, yeah. Sarah?
I would just say also, if you get federal money, I know it's an extremely rigorous process for getting that bid out for companies. And you don't actually have to go with the lowest bidder. And it's an extensive interviewing process, and they have to prove that they've done this kind of project before, which means it's a very narrow field, actually, of companies that can do it. And you get to find out, are other places that hired them happy with the work they did? You know, so it's not that you have to go with the lowest bidder. That is the way some bids work, but that's not the way this kind of bid would work. I don't know what your procurement policy is, but even if you don't get federal or state money, you still have a lot of say in what kind of company you would get. And I'm sure Dutchess County is the same way, so either way, I wouldn't worry.
Pete?
So,
Oh, sorry. Pete, then Lisa. Lisa, then Pete.
all right.
You two work it out.
I'm Lisa.
Your neighbors now.
No, Phyllis is talking about how we don't have time and we need to move this forward. In an ideal structure, when would the trustees decide? And when you make this decision, when do we see any difference? When do things move ahead?
Because we agree that time is precious, I think we will decide this winter, in the next
To
month.
decide this winter.
To decide whether or not to transfer.
And let's say that you do decide to transfer. Then how much time does it take to get that ramped up?
It will really depend on what sort of things show up in the negotiation of the transfer agreement. I would guess between 6 to 12 months that might take to make that arrive at a document that everyone's happy with.
During which time we are continuing to...
During which time we
patch.
still own it and we're still responsible for it and we still gotta fix everything, yeah.
But that was my question in the beginning. What was the timetable? And you said there was no timetable.
Because
There's
there's
not a
not an
timetable.
established timetable for
Well, you just
needing
said- wait
to
a minute.
make this
Well, wait a minute,
decision.
Whoa.
Okay, I can speak for what you're saying here. So there's no deadline. We can wait 2 years and decide. I don't think we should, but we could. So there's no deadline, Vince.
But you just said to her
There's
about the
not any
deadline.
outside forces
And
beyond the
you
condition
want
of
to
the
get it done
system.
this winter. No, I just asked that earlier.
A deadline means someone else is deciding when you act.
Pardon me?
A deadline is someone else or some external thing deciding when you act. This is us deciding when we act. I wouldn't call this a deadline, Vince, but if you disagree, I apologize. I don't think it's a deadline.
It's a timeline.
What
It's
is
a
a
difference.
deadline? What's a deadline?
Pete and then Julia.
Timeline.
I mean, basically, I've been having this conversation with a lot of people, and I'm fundamentally sort of at my core opposed to giving up autonomy over our own system, but every time I start really working through what's actually going to happen in order for us to maintain control of the system, it starts to get overwhelming. And one of the things that I keep coming back to in my considerations is, and this has been brought up as well, having responsibility and consistency being on the backs of somebody who is not elected, say, but whose job it is to do that day in and day out. There's something to be said about that, because we never know what the board is going to look like, the village board is going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years, right? They're talking about if we were to keep control of our own system, we would have to institute policies of maintenance that we hadn't previously, in order not to end up having the same problem in another 50 years. Who's to say, you know, everybody obviously has the best intentions, but who's to say we don't just go really lax in 10, 15 years? We start having budget issues, we start cutting back. I think that that's actually an argument for having the authority do it, is politics. You know, because all of this stuff is going to change. The one thing with them is they have a charter, they have a board, they have to answer to. There is some political accountability at the county level. And again, I don't want to give up our system, but I just don't understand how we could actually logistically, realistically plan out that far in the future and commit to it.
Also. Julia, then we'll come back to you.
So if the board decides to do this, there's a certain protocol in place before it gets transferred, right? So we need to have 5% of the population or 100 property owners, not residents, but property owners, right?
So shall I
Sign it.
explain the whole transfer process and how it works?
Well, it's a pretty,
Well,
I think it's, what it is that we have to petition the county legislature first, right?
Well, you skipped a couple little things, so maybe
Okay, no,
I'll
you
paint
do it.
the whole picture and then if you
Yeah,
still have
you
a
do it.
question. So for a municipality to transfer a system to the authority, this is the process. The village board says, please come take us over. They start a transfer agreement, they show it to us, it goes back and forth. Again, we look at it, we put in what we want and we end up with this document. And this is when it gets sort of technical. So say both parties want to transfer, both parties resolve to implement this transfer document. The water authority then has to go to the county legislature and ask them to take a formal action, which is to draw a district around Tivoli that encompasses the water and sewer users. Because right now, they have no authority here to run a water system. We do because we're a village and villages get to run their own water systems. So that goes to the county for an action. For the county to take that action of drawing a district, there's a mandatory public hearing, and they vote, and that vote is subject to what's called permissive referendum. If they vote, there's 45 days during which 5%, I think it's either 100 people or 5% of the voters, whichever is less. It's a low and easy threshold to meet.
Voters or property owners?
Voters. It's not property owners.
I
It's
thought this
registered
phase was
voters.
property owners, I'm sorry.
Yep.
And the next phase was voters.
So if you're a renter and you're registered to vote in Tivoli, you get to vote in that vote. You don't have to own your property. Then, during that 45-day period, if the petition comes together, which has it's very low threshold, easy to get, then that forces a referendum. That's what permissive referendum is. If no one gets a petition together or the petition doesn't have enough signatures, then the vote stands, the district is drawn. If the petition happens and the referendum is forced, then there's a vote here in Tivoli. Registered voters vote in that, and they vote it up or down, the county drawing that district. They vote it down, the district doesn't come together, the authority can't come in, and Tivoli keeps its systems. That's that process. Did you have a question in there? Or was that
I misunderstood from the video I watched of the May meeting,
yeah,
so.
it gets very technical and nuanced, so I'm always
It is, and I thought it was sort of the other way around that, so
Yeah.
I defer to you.
Okay.
One time.
Someone over here. Tom Cordier.
Yeah, for the last 10, 12 years, from Albany, there's been a lot of pressure on consolidation, moving villages into towns. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to lose, if you go with the county, you're going to lose about half your workload. Will there be pressure from the residents to say, well, I'm paying a town tax and a village tax, why don't I just pay one tax?
Well, I think that's not different than now. I mean, now your water and sewer rents are distinct from your village property tax.
Yeah.
Already, right? So, I mean, personally, from where I sit, I think the trustees would agree, I could stay as busy as I am now without water and sewer. There's things all over this village that have to wait, that we don't get to, and I'll just be frank with you all. Those are things I'm dying to do, that I want to do, okay? I want to fix the softball field. I want to have the best softball field, you know? It's not in great shape. But when we have a week like 2 weeks ago, I'm not working on it. So I guess as far as, it's a fair question. Well, if you know, gave away the water and sewer, and then, you know, some places are looking at giving away their courts. You know, some of our neighboring towns and villages are looking to consolidate courts. Some places outsource garbage collection. And so you wonder, at what point is there anything left? Personally, I don't think we have to worry about that. I know this community, and we're not going to go away. We would burn this place to the ground before we dissolve Tivoli, I think.
You know, and I'd like
With pride.
to point out too that it's not that we haven't already participated in feasibility studies for, say, highway consolidation with the town and village of Red Hook. And I think that one of the things that was illustrated by that was the fact that it's not just a, you know, free-for-all, mash it together until it makes sense, or at the expense of making sense or losing our identity as a village. It was a very collaborative process to see where we could mesh services and save funds across those municipalities while still maintaining our individuality and our own village identity. So I have, I would say, some confidence in not just our residents, but, you know, your elected officials in maintaining our separateness, if you will.
Tom's correct. I mean, there is just tremendous pressure from Albany, particularly the governor, to eradicate levels of government. You can understand, well, there's a lot of layers of tax, and, you know, it's a complicated mess here in New York State. And there are villages and communities that have dissolved. In order for that to happen, the municipality itself has a vote and says, we want to dissolve. And I don't think that we're ever going to vote for that. But, you know, what would be left if we're not doing water and sewer? We've got buildings and grounds and streets and sidewalks and planning and zoning, which is probably the biggest thing that I'm going to give away over my dead body. You know, that's how we control what happens here and preserve the community that we love, right? Now, operating water and sewer, there's lots of people that can do that. There's companies all over the country that do that. There's agencies that do it. Frankly, it's not sexy, and we all know that, and that's why there were only 30 people at the first 2 meetings, right? You know, I think if we go that way, the model is like it's a utility. You're paying another utility. You know, Tivoli doesn't generate our own electricity, and when the storm comes through, we don't have to put the poles back up. It's a trade-off. We don't have as direct control over the rates, but it frees us up to do other things with our time and with our lives. In the back there, please.
Ultimately, I think it comes down to dollars and cents, from what I understand at least. Are we guaranteed a cap of some sort that it wouldn't exceed that 9.5 or 10? Or do we get into this, and I respect the engineer's survey, and if I can, I'll use an example. In the village, we were going to have a lot of work done down Montgomery with sidewalks and sewer, and we got about 200 feet and we ran out of money. So is there some sort of cap or guarantee that we wouldn't exceed that, and all of a sudden we have a $20 million or a $30 million expenditure, and all of a sudden our water and sewer is right out of the roof?
So there is no guarantee, there is no cap, and that's true for either entity who could be responsible for these systems. You know, you get your best estimate, but you never know what you're going to find, what's going to come up. So there's no guarantee.
I mean, the condition assessment is comprehensive, right? So we know.
We have a very good idea, but again, you know, to say that it's never going to, maybe there's a crisis in the price of steel in the world, and prices of commodities go up. I mean, you can't see that stuff. It's, you know, you take your car to the shop, they look it over, they say, this is what you got. Sometimes they find something else. There's no guarantee.
But based on that, though, if the village is in control, they can make decisions based on the economic costs.
Mm-hmm.
If we hand it over to somebody else, they're going to make decisions based on the expediency of it, and it doesn't matter the cost, because it's going to come back on us.
Well, I don't think it's as clear in black and white as that. You know, the water authority, as Susan was saying, this is their charter, this is what they have to do. And if they were running around raising rates willy-nilly without any, you know, responsiveness to the actual costs, they would be out of business, you know? And it's also important to understand that both of us, a village and the authority, we're nonprofit. You run something, you try and get the capital, the money you need to run it, and maybe have a little contingency for the rainy day. Often that's 15%, and that's how you go forward with your asset. That's going to be true for either of us. They don't have shareholders that they're trying to give dividends to. Just to be clear about
I
that.
think that we should clarify too that each water system operates
It's a good point.
independently. So it's not as if the water authority can come in and raise rates in our water district to help fund capital improvements in another water district. So what goes on here in terms of rates is directly responsive to the needs of our individual water system. I think it's an important distinction to make.
Yes, sir.
Getting to the approval, which we were talking about, walking us through that, and so it was not property owners, but voters. Is that voters in general, or people in the village? Because, I mean, as an example, what's the capacity we're talking about? How much water and sewer capacity do we have or need in the area? Because it's whoever's connected to it, right?
Right.
And then, shouldn't they be the ones who decide? Or is it an open vote, like everybody in the county gets to vote on this?
No, it's, I have tons of notes here, that's why it's taking me a minute to actually locate it, but, okay. Okay, so this is the county drawing this district that would be necessary for the authority to come in. As its first action, the county legislature schedules a public hearing at which any member of the public may speak. The legislature then adopts resolutions to create the district. These resolutions are subject to a 45-day permissive referendum period. A legal notice is published of the adoption of the resolution subject to permissive referendum. If during this period no referendum is triggered, the resolutions stand and the district is established. Triggering a permissive referendum by petition. The petition form is made available upon request by the clerk of the legislature. So they have their vote, anyone from Tivoli runs down and says, I want that petition.
That's what I was going to say. Anyone from Tivoli, the village?
Yeah,
From the water district, and that water district
where I want to get at.
is primarily the boundaries of the village of Tivoli. There are some houses up on North Road which are outside of the boundaries. So the district would include those houses that are served by us, but not in the.
Right, so to clarify this is just straight out of their legislator book. Only resident electors are eligible to sign the petition. These are individuals that are registered to vote at an address within the district. So we do have a few users who are just over the village line. They would be in the new district and they could vote. But it's registered voters. It's not if you own your property. It's, you know, any renters or.
But within the, who are using it, basically.
The users get to vote.
The users get to vote.
Those who will have to pay.
Yes. That's what I was getting at. The people who are going to vote are the people who are going to pay for this.
Yes.
But if you're a renter, you're not, and an owner are two separate entities.
Not according to this. It's just like voting for president. If I moved to Kingston and I've been there 2 days and I register to vote for president, or register to vote for mayor of Kingston, I can vote for mayor of Kingston just like someone who's lived there 50 years. That's
But also landlords would be passing along any, I'm sure, any increase to tenants as well, so.
But I mean, I'm guessing that, for example, if there are a lot of kind of transient renters, students who may be here for a year or two who choose to vote or not, but if they choose to vote, they're impacting a system that they may only use for a year.
But it's their civic right to have that vote.
Okay, well, I'm just,
Yeah. Louise?
Okay. As a village and village residents, the village is made up of the village hall and the fire company. Now, my understanding is that the fire company is affected by this wastewater authority. In what way the payments to the fire company, if something has to be repaired on them, that is paid out by the wastewater authority, because I've been involved in that where I work. That everything has to go for bid, everything has to be approved, and the fire company is under the wastewater authority. And they are paid, like they had building repairs, it was paid through the wastewater authority.
Our fire company are you talking about?
The fire company of Hyde Park.
Okay, that's,
And they're in a different entity, but they do have some jurisdiction over the fire company in a certain context. Now, if there needs to be repaired to the firehouse, or something has to be done for the firehouse, through the wastewater authority, who pays for that? Is that funded through the county to the wastewater authority, or is it passed on to us in our bill for cost for that entity also? Because the wastewater authority is what it is, an authority over your jurisdiction of your water and your waste. So my question is how much does that affect the fire company?
it's not apples to apples. The way the fire company works in Hyde Park is different than how it works here in Tivoli, and this has no impact on our fire company, apart from
As far as you...
they're gonna open hydrants and hopefully the water will come out without breaking the pipe. I mean, they have a stake in this, to be sure. Capacity of the water tower is another one.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know what the deal is in Hyde Park there, but that's not...
Right, because I was just, curious about that, because everything that goes on, because they've had broken pipes, and they do have an outside company come in and fix all that. So even though they are setting up the same thing as we are to have the pipes replaced, they continually have water pipes breaking also. So, I mean, it's something inevitable that you're going to deal with constantly, and that is going to be passed. If they don't have the monies, then the extra cost of bringing in a second company, that cost will be passed on to us. So, I mean, that's a cost that's going to raise the bills for us over time.
It's just like, you know, we had to spend this extra $10,000 or $12,000 unbudgeted 2 weeks ago. That's getting passed right on to all of us, you know. Tim, did you have one?
Yeah, I am pretty sure the reason that there's an intertwine between the authority and Hyde Park is the water system in Hyde Park was owned by the fire company prior to it going to the authority back in the 90s.
That would do it.
And just to follow along, I think, to me, it makes absolute sense to go in the direction of handing it over to the authority. I think for many reasons, the water and sewer is basically a utility, like you said. The only real control that you can have on it is whether or not to spend money. And I think that control has really been a large part of why we are where we are now, is we've chosen not to spend the money for way too long. And now it's coming back to bite us because we have a lot of deferred maintenance that is all catching up at once. And I just think that the way to go, I don't think we as citizens have time to meaningfully contribute to managing the project. I don't think you as the elected officials have time to take it over and run the project, whether it's hiring consultants and other people to do the work and whatnot. I think handing over the authorities to things to do, and it really is something we don't want to think about. We just want to get the bill, flush our toilets, and turn on the tap. That's it. We don't, other than that, the only control really you can say is, well, I don't want to spend money now. With water and sewer, you just have to keep, once you get to that point where it works pretty well, you've got to keep up with the maintenance, and to have a professional organization doing it makes all the sense in the world to me. So I would encourage you to do that.
John?
Yeah, I was just going to say I spent some time working with the Red Hook Village on a somewhat similar problem where they're trying to develop a sewer over there. And we had a number of meetings with the Wastewater Authority, and I found them to be incredibly professional and knowledgeable and very easy to work with. And in that circumstance, there was no question that they were much better equipped to handle this than an organization within the village was. They had the knowledge, they had the experience. It was kind of like, you know, if you want to do your own plumbing, you could fix your own plumbing, right? Or you could hire a plumber, and I guess it depends on how confident do you feel that you're that good of a plumber.
Did you have? No.
I did, because the big thing in looking at the numbers is that the sticker shock, you know, it's gonna cost more money. And I actually do check my water bill, and, yeah, I don't pay the minimum, and there's 3 of us. And Tommy Chrissy was like 400 something, made me feel a little bit better. But, you know, I've always understood that the water and sewer bill was supposed to pay for itself. And I'm wondering if that's not really true, like if it really hasn't been paying for itself, and that's adding to our sticker shock.
I think it's true. I think it hasn't been paying for itself.
Yeah,
For
it has
example,
been.
if you need a new water tower, I mean, here's what's going on with the water tower, okay? There are 2 issues. One, it's undersized. For a village of this size with wooden buildings and the density that we have, the capacity of that tower should be double what it is. It's 150,000 gallons. If you were building this village today and you wanted, you know, all the insurance companies to be happy and your fire department to be happy, it would be 300,000 gallons. So that's the first thing. Now, in 1938, it was probably big enough. But, you know, Tivoli's doubled in size since then. The whole development came in the condos, and new houses around the village. The second problem is that while the water is tested and it's safe to drink, deep down under layers of paint, there's lead paint. And so we are legally bound, if we're going to recoat that tower, which we've been told for a number of years by the health department we must do, you have to sandblast every inch of that tower, capture every flake of paint, outside and in, and do lead abatement. I mean, it's like put a bag over the tower and sandblast every inch. And take all that stuff away and dispose of it however they dispose of lead paint, because I don't know. That process costs more than a brand new 300,000 gallon water tower. That's straight economics. I mean, you know, now, I think the water and sewer rates have been enough for what we've been doing, but we have not, as a community, and, you know, previous governments have done their best, and I'm not pointing any fingers, but just over 80 years, you know, every so often you have to replace a water tower, or you have to expand a sewer plant, and we don't have rates that have built reserves for those big capital expenditures. So, I talked to one person, and he said, well, you probably should have been raising this, you know, every water bill gets raised 2% every year, and then we'd have this extra money. And I said, well, yeah, that's probably true, and it didn't happen. And if I or some other government said, every year we're gonna raise your bill, we would have gotten yelled at.
But I think that's what's gonna happen if we turn it over, where it's gonna be reality hits us, there's gonna be a
Yes.
huge jump.
Yep.
And then every year, we're gonna see this little climb that, for those of us who've been here a long time, we haven't seen, you know?
Right.
But that's really gonna happen regardless of whether we transfer the system or if we
Right.
do it
Yeah, but yes,
ourselves.
there's
So that
pain
hike
coming,
is
there's
coming.
pain coming, that's for sure.
That's what I mean,
Definitely
people,
coming.
there's gonna be pain either way
Yes.
in your bill.
Yep,
Right.
that's the reality check. Pete?
Just a quick thing is, part of what leads me to not want to give up the water control is the same sort of thing that led my wife and I to build our own house. And we were really excited about it for the first 8 or 10 years doing the plumbing. And honestly, right now, the last thing in the world we want to do. So like even that maintenance is just, you know, after the initial excitement and when it comes down to the reality, the boring reality of it, you know, I again go back to worrying about not so much right now, not so much this group of people talking in this room right now, but whoever's going to be talking about it in 15 or 20 years. And also I spoke to somebody about this a while back who's very smart. He's been around for a long time. And, you know, I was talking about how, you know, I was worried partly about, you know, Tivoli losing its autonomy by handing over the water system. And, you know, our autonomy is part of our identity. And he said, well, listen, when we lost the school, when we lost the schoolhouse in Tivoli, that was a blow to our identity. right? That was something that people had great emotional attachment to, and that was a big part of the life in the village. Our sewer pipes, not so much. Right? So the sewer pipes are sewer pipes. They're not our identity, the way certain other infrastructures that we've had in the village have been at different points in the past. And I thought that was a really good point.
Yes, good, very good.
My hands keep changing, okay. Ken?
Yeah, there are different standards for water reporting depending on the size of the system. And, our guys are in compliance with what they need to do for a system this size. I think it kicks in over 10,000 people as a different level of reporting, a different standard of reporting, or there's some threshold. Do we jump into that by being part of this larger entity, or do we stay with our current standards of reporting on water quality? I'd love to see the water quality requirements go up.
I'm not sure. This is an educated guess. Basically, the Tivoli system remains the Tivoli system. It's this big, it's the same users. All the financing is self-contained, as was said earlier. They don't raise rates in Tivoli to help offset budget gaps in Hyde Park. It's all, each entity funds itself. I would imagine the Board of Health in Dutchess County, I don't know about this threshold of different standards. I don't know.
Once you reach a certain threshold of population being served under a particular system, you now have federal things that are much more stringent than the smaller villages.
Well, I would imagine that we're not going to grow, so we'll probably stay.
I was going to say, I think that answers that question in and of itself. If it's based on the system size and the users in that system, that's going to be determined by our water
By our
district and
size,
the users.
not the
Right, not
authorities,
cumulative,
not the authorities.
but those users of the Tivoli system, whether that system is administered by the water authority or by the municipal government.
Got it, makes sense. I see the logic there.
Gentleman in the corner?
Yes, I was wondering, based on the current expected cost for the renovations and improvements, what percentage of rate increase is expected?
Okay, so in the first 5 years, so this is a model, right? It's not nuanced to reality as tightly as you might like, but that's what models are. This model presumes that one entity, us or the authority, goes out and borrows $9.5 million so that there's the money, there's the capital to make all the improvements, say, in the first couple years. And then, in order to pay off that debt, the debt service is distributed among the 470 odd users, and that's where your bills go up. That increase is debt service being paid out over 30 years. In addition to that, there would be likely small increases, 2% or something, so that you have money, so we don't end up here in another 40 years or something, right?
So is the rate increase going to be based on interest rates attached to that financing? And how do we determine if we're going to get a 10% increase or a 40% increase?
The capital cost that's anticipated, the $9.5 million, is assumed to be funded by zero interest rate public funding, like the EFC or the Clean Water Act or the Department of Agriculture. And, I came from a lot of the same positions that people who hear about this first comes from. I was worried about the responsiveness and giving away control, but I was also worried about funding and whether Dutchess County, whether the authority would be as aggressive at looking for low-cost funding. I've come to the conclusion that we may not be as high on their list in terms of getting grant funding as maybe somebody else is. They'll pursue it. But that also is determined by who else is in the queue, whether you get the grant funding. But I am also very, very persuaded that they will be better at getting the 0% interest financing than Tivoli would be. First of all, they have a higher bond rating than we do. They have all kinds of advantages going into that. They have better writers of those grants. So I think it'll be like a net. You know, maybe if we had Brent Kovalchik and an equivalent engineer to get some grant funding, we would get some grants. But we might end up having to pay higher interest rates on some other money that we were seeking.
The answer is we really don't know what kind of a percentage of increase we're going to have.
What's assumed in these numbers is that we will bond the whole thing, that we will not get any grants, but that they will be at 0% interest.
So essentially, we're leaving ourselves some wiggle room in the event that we do secure a grant.
Worst case scenario, there's no grant, we got to pay for the whole thing.
Right, and that's what what those numbers that are projected already reflect, is worst case scenario.
So we're going to take $9.5 million divided by 400 and some odd properties.
What it comes up to is a payment cost, an amortization cost over 30 years of about $300,000, which is the revenues from both water and sewer. So your water and sewer bill is, if you're at the minimum usage, $480 a year. That's about what you will be paying on the capital cost as additional cost.
As additional cost?
Yes. What we may find is that the actual water usage, we get some efficiencies on, and then that part of the cost may come down.
So, as additional cost to the minimum, it seems that rates are going to be double what they currently are.
Yes.
That our projection reflected that, whether that's the authority or the municipality.
Well, I understand that part.
No, that's
Absolutely. I think within that first 5 years, that priority list there, we expect to see rates double for water and sewer by year 5.
I'm just going to throw this out there. So during the horrendous break 2 weeks ago, and we had these gentlemen down from the New York State Rural Water Association who came in and were here for a couple days. These guys were fabulous. You know, they brought in special equipment to listen to the pipes and the hydrants trying to find this leak. So we got to spend some time together, and certainly I talked to them as much as I could about what's going on in Tivoli and the choice. And this is just anecdotal, but he did say the average price for a year's worth of water in New York State for a family of 4 is about $700. And we are under that currently. So, just saying. Vince?
Just going back to what you were just talking about the rates and all that stuff. First of all, you're going to put in for grant money. Say you get half of it, okay? So then you're going to pay either $4 to $5 million out the other way. With going with your water authority, you're going to be paying the $9 million quicker than you will if it stays here with the village. Because this work doesn't have to be done as fast as everybody thinks it needs to be done. Okay? That's a bunch of hokey pokey stuff. You know, here's this hand, don't watch this one. And I'm just saying to you, you have a chance of putting this out over a period of years. You know, these pipes were put in 80 years ago. Well, they had water main breaks for how many years? Tom Cordier, how many water main breaks did you have when you were mayor? Quite a few, right?
About 10.
Yeah.
A month.
So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm just trying to say to you, if you turn around, spread the $9 million out over a period of years, and do this work gradually, like she said about CT Mail doing Red Hook. CT Mail's been doing Red Hook for over 30 years. I know the guy that owned Gary Mail, was an owner. They're from Lakeland. So I know, I've been around this stuff for a long, long time. I've worked on water mains and sewer lines myself. But I'm just saying to you, this is, you know, if it takes you 10, 20 years to do this work, you know, that's what it's gonna be. And like I said to you
But
earlier.
since we're not paying for it
here's the thing.
immediately, we're paying for it over 30 years. So we're getting it immediately,
So what?
but we're not paying
You're
for it.
spreading I'm just saying, you're spreading the $9 million that you need over a period of years.
Yes.
You know.
But that's the intention regardless. If you look at the water report, I'm looking at section 3.9, if anybody's following along. But this is available on the website. There are copies in the library. I'm just letting you know what I'm referencing. So when we did this evaluation of the water system, part of that was looking at all of the improvements that need to be made and then assessing them a priority.
You don't have to do all of those things. You don't have to do those things.
We don't have to do what things? I don't.
Can you specify what, because there's a lack of specificity on both sides.
So what I'm
Does it have
saying
to be
is that recommended improvements to the water system were divvied up into different categories. Those which required immediate attention, items that are critical assets in imminent danger of failure, or have safety, security, or other regulatory compliance issues. Category A, items that have an expected remaining service life of 5 years or fewer. Category B, items that have an expected remaining life of between 6 and 10 years. And Category C, items that have an expected remaining service life between 11 and 20 years.
This was done by an outside engineer.
This was done by an outside engineer.
No.
No, this is the feasibility study that was funded by Dutchess County to give us a comprehensive assessment of the condition of the water system to help us navigate which repairs needed to be done, and then allowed us to assign a priority to those in accordance with when does this need to be replaced. And so all of the improvements that are recommended here fall into one of those three categories.
I get it. So why do you think? Why does this gentleman think that that's wrong? I'm not saying he's right. I'm just saying.
No, I'm not saying who's right or wrong. I'm just letting you know how this is broken down, and it was done for both the water system and also for our sewer system.
What he's trying to say, what he's trying to say is that it's broken down into categories, A, B, C, D, however many you want to go. But A is what needs to be done first, and A is not $9 million.
No, A is $9 million.
It is? A?
Yes.
Immediate?
Immediate, A?
Yes.
So what is the total?
No, it's
So let me speak to that. So they give us the estimate of the first category, the under 5-year category. That's where you get the 9.5 million. And then further out, regardless of who owns it, this is how much the pain is. Then you got to deal with those 6 to 11 year things, and then the 11 to 10 year things. And you're going to have to get more money.
So that money's not in there?
It doesn't go out that far, because it's really, you can get a good projection for the next 4 years, but not 20 years from now. It's just harder. So it's not, those numbers get less dependable, and so they're not in there.
So an independent engineering firm that has no dog in the fight looked at the system and prioritized ABC.
Yes.
So, but you think there's some kind of
You don't have to
ledger
go
domain
by,
going on?
you don't have to go by that prioritization.
But you gotta go by something, and they did a report.
Look, like I said, you can turn around and replace, you can take 100 feet, 200 feet, 500 feet of water line, put it in, brand new, right? 6 months from there, you can have a water main break right on that.
Fair enough.
It's not gonna, it's a scare tactic. That you gotta go out and spend all this money right away.
I guess Vince, I would ask
Why would they want
if
to scare us?
there's,
Why would these engineers?
Well, first, the biggest thing you gotta replace is the water tower.
Right.
And that's
Okay.
right. So I guess my question would be, Vince, if we don't go by this blueprint, what would you suggest? Do we go and just replace it by, because my understanding is
The very best thing that you
that.
can do is turn around, you already have the engineering thing about your pipe, okay? You do so many feet per year.
But why would we
Okay?
not do
You
the
don't
current
want to do,
expense?
you don't want to do the whole village
But if we have
in 10 years, do the whole village.
But we can, there's a way to do it. Obviously, that would be better than doing it piecemeal, because everyone gets new pipes right away. And
And you
because you're
don't have
borrowing,
pipes
you don't
causing
pay all
breaks
at
in
once, you
little
pay over
pipes.
30 years. So you get the benefit of replacement sooner,
You're still going
and
to,
then you're
you're
paying
still going to
over time.
replace the stuff. You're going to still have water main breaks. There's
No
nothing's going
kidding.
to stop you from.
Of course.
But why are you turning around and saying that we have to replace these pipes because the water mains are broken?
Because they
Isn't that why you replace water mains?
That's part of it, and the water
Okay.
mains are a
And I
symptom.
said to you, you can put a brand new pipeline in 6 months and have a water main break on that brand new line.
Things break, but newer things don't break as frequently or as horribly as older
That's not
things.
totally true.
Is there other infrastructure other than pipes that are a problem on the A list?
Yes.
What are those? Could you just explain them to us? No,
Okay.
they're written down.
It's a good time, I mean, I'm glad that you want to get that technical, and we'll try and pull it up for you, but these reports have been around since April, and you can read them. And I'm not, it's fine, but, so, let's see, well, I talked about those clarifier tanks, those were immediate. We had to go out and do $50,000. It probably should have happened a couple of years ago. We got the report, and we started looking at that immediate category, before A, and we're working on those things. So, the water tower is the big one. I haven't read this morning, so I'm rusty, no pun intended as well. They're there, Ken, I'm not gonna make them
My
up right
point is,
now.
it's not just pipes.
No.
Because I understand the logic of not replacing every pipe tomorrow. That doesn't make sense
But
even to me.
So like our well
there are
houses, I
multiple
don't know.
components to the water and sewer systems that require replacement. Not all of them are pipes. We're talking about even safety and safety hazards, the conditions that our DPW are expected to work in when we talk about the wells, even the wellheads
The well
there.
house is a good example.
That is a great example. It's simple things like ladders missing rungs, safety issues that really need to be addressed, and some of them are minor, but still no less important.
Right, and so it goes beyond the pipe issue.
It goes
Yes.
well beyond the pipe issue, yeah.
Karen and then Alex.
I'm really confused now about the project's $9.1 or $2 million. And that's just the first phase?
Yes.
All right, that's the first 5 years? Which means that we're replacing, we're taking care of the sewer treatment plant, we're taking care of the water tower.
We're doing the dire stuff. The stuff that's gonna fail in 5 years, you fix that first,
So
within 5
is
years.
that water main, sewer lines too? And
Yes.
water lines?
Well-
So what's left?
So it's a-
The bulk of our system is in bad enough shape. No, but after 5 years, what's left?
So it's a good time, and I'm sorry, I don't have it off the top of my head, this is a good time to answer that question. That question is right in those reports.
Oh, I know.
We can all go.
And I thought,
Rather than
I'm
me
gonna let you guys know.
misspeak right now, we can look it up. And the deal is, most of our stuff is in such bad shape that most of it falls in category A, 5 years.
so in
Then there are
5
some
years,
things
our
that are
water,
gonna last a little longer, we don't have to fix them for 10 years or 15 years, but we will have to fix them. And when we get there, we'll have to find that money too.
so our bills will probably double, right, at this point?
Yes.
With phase one.
Mhm.
And then we have another phase and yet another phase.
Right.
So it's
Fortunately, the phases
possible-
are biggest one first, and then they get smaller.
So, but it could be 4 times what we're paying now.
No.
I'm not gonna
By
say
the
that.
end, I don't know. Well,
No.
put a little inflation in there too. And
Yeah.
higher
It's gonna be
costs.
expensive, folks.
That's online,
This stuff
that whole
Yes.
report's online, right?
The whole
It is
report,
online and there are copies available.
And the stuff that can wait for 20 years.
Don't let it wait for 20.
It's not as much value. The other thing I think it's important for me to say is, we're gonna do it all at once, but we're gonna pay for it over 30 years. So I'm not sure how doing it incrementally to the same dollar value and spreading out that 30, it's not gonna save you much money.
But that's the
think of
first
what that is
5 years
logistically
we're
and
paying.
administratively to spread it out like
Yeah.
that. All right, Alex has been waiting for just a few moments.
This is a really difficult issue when you're doubling the rate for your bills. So on one level, I want to thank you guys and the board for dealing with this issue that's extremely unpopular. I don't want to see my bills double, but I do want to see the water system handled in a professional manner. not an amateur manner that it's been handled for the last 20 years. And I really appreciate you guys taking this unpopular stance. And I wish that our previous mayor, who's in charge of Dutchess County, had taken an unpopular stance back then and raised our water rates in a reasonable level so we don't have this, but we're not going through what we're going through tonight, where everyone learns it doubles. We need a new water tank. It's got lead paint.
That's a no-brainer.
There's not an inch. Let's just replace 1 inch at a time. No, we need to go in. We're either all in or we're not all in. And unfortunately, it's too late. Molinaro and the other mayors left it so we don't really have much room to make a decision.
I agree.
When we, early on, Hayden brought up this thing of, pros and cons, I'm gonna say, and I've said it, I think at the State of the Village maybe, a pro, I suggest, of a different entity running it, is they don't have to worry about getting reelected, and they can give you the truth. They can give you bad news. There is no incentive on them to sugarcoat it or hide it under the rug so that you'll vote for them next time. That's a danger, when it's like, you really gotta fix something, and someone's gonna scream at you when you tell them the actual bill. You're not gonna tell them as easily.
One more thing, that's called being a grown-up. And the other thing is, the one concern is that we're gonna lose control. And the issue is, in this agreement that we have with them, can we make it so that if they don't respond in a certain amount of hours to a breakage, we get money back? Is there some sort of back and forth so we don't feel totally out of control? That there's some sort of, they have to respond to us. And I'm sure you guys have talked to the other towns who've dealt with these people. Is there a history where they don't respond? So if not, then we can feel somewhat assured that they will respond.
So I will tell you that the board actually had,
We met with Eileen Rohr.
Aileen Rohr,
Hyde Park.
Supervisor at Hyde Park.
how many systems in Hyde Park did they take over?
Eight.
In Hyde Park alone. I've also had conversations with developments in and around Red Hook, the development behind the movie theater, the golf course that's out on 199 and all the housing out there. And the feedback that we've gotten is that the transition was far easier than they expected, and that the responsiveness and their experience in dealing with the water authority as they administer their water systems has been very positive. Actually, we invited some of those individuals to come and speak to residents, and there's obviously varying commitments there, but seek them out. The water authority does list the water systems that they are that they have ownership of, and there are individuals there that you can talk to and have a real conversation with about what their experience is and how the water authority responds, what their rates look like. And we're not the first community to be having this conversation. And by community, I don't necessarily mean village. I mean water system with vested users who are trying to decide the right course of action.
That's different than a village.
Bruna, did you have something?
Yeah, but you kind of answered 470 something
users?
households.
Yeah.
And the other is, if you would each share, what is your conclusion on what you think should happen?
Well, do I have to go first?
We haven't talked to each other about that yet, so.
Or each person individually?
I'll go. I mean, I've been thinking about this deeply. Well, I've been a trustee since 2011, so 7 years. And I think we could do it. I think there are more advantages with transfer than not. That's what I think. And just to rattle off some of those, we don't know who the mayor's going to be in 10 years, or the board. What if they drop the ball? I mean, Alex just threw some previous mayors under the bus. We don't know who's coming later, and how can we know that they're going to be responsible and do a good job? Another advantage, the five of us, we have a lot of talents, a lot of love for Tivoli, and there's a lot we want to do, and I'm gonna say it, there's a lot we've done as a board in the last few years. Water and sewer is not one I want to do. I could do it. Is that the best use of Joel Griffith and what I can do for Tivoli? I don't think so. I don't think so. And frankly, if the village decided to keep it, or there was a referendum, I might think about leaving this position, because there should be someone in this position who wants to do it. I just want to be honest with you. You know, I love this job, but if that's what this community decides, I'm not your guy. That's okay. I can live with that. I got other things I could do, you know. But other advantages, I think the costs are largely the same, and the administration of managing the projects and chasing the money, and then once you get a grant is the biggest headache. It's like the reporting requirements that Robin and I spend 2 or 3 hours on every week to keep up with $120,000 for Pine Street, or $50,000 for the waterfront stabilization design. It's so much work, you guys. It's a lot of work. And if there's a professional who does that every day and they like doing it, they should do it before me. Because there's other things I like to do that I don't think anyone can do better than me, and that's what I should be working on. Water and sewer is not one of them. So there, I've said it. Okay.
Yeah, my initial response to the thought of the authority coming in was to say that, no, you don't give up your water, like it's yours, it's what we have. And then I started reading and thinking about how many ways we could mess this up. You know, this, you know, we have a lot of skills, and doing this is not among them. And just the need for professionalism became clear to me last week when I was driving down North Road in the rain, and the guys were out looking for the leak, and there they were with a demo saw cutting a hole just south of Trish Teeger's house in the middle of the road, where Jim knew that there was a valve buried under 8 inches of asphalt. He knew it was there, nobody else knew it was there, and you know, the system is patched together. You know, like, if we were to lose him, God forbid, we would be so doomed, you know, and it was a really, it was an eye-opening couple of days, you know, to see him really panicking that there was not enough water in the tower, that if we had a fire, we would be protected, you know, and it's great that the fire chief, you know, communicated with all the other municipalities around here to have tanker trucks standing by for us, but we can't do it like this.
Like operating in a perpetual state of crisis,
right,
is where I feel that we're at. You know, honestly, I have 2 boys, right? And I think about ultimately being responsible for not just the reliability of the water, but the quality of the water in this system. And I'm really great at my job, and I think that I bring a lot of passion to being a village trustee, but I am no water and sewer expert. So I can tell you that I will commit 110%, and I've read these reports inside out, backwards, upside down, you name it, and they scare me. I think that if this village committed to taking on this water project, we could do it, we could, but I'm always gonna have that reservation. You know, I think that combined with the fact that we do have all of our eggs in one basket. We have Jimmy. We have Jimmy. And what if something happens to Jimmy, to echo what Deputy Major said? And that's also a really scary predicament to be in. So honestly, as I said, while I know that we could do this, I also am trying to take a step back and look at the larger picture. What is in the best interest, not just of the few, but for everyone in the village? And I think that sometimes that's a harder decision, because even when you don't want to do something, sometimes you have to recognize where you are not best qualified to be heading up a project.
And to secure the system for the future, right? Because every board and every mayor has had the best of intentions all along, and yet we still ended up here. So
who's to say, you know, if we turn it over, we know that it's going to be taken care of in perpetuity.
I have served under 3 mayors, Tom Cordier, Brian Crana, and Joel. They each had their own skill set. Tom Cordier actually went out and took phragmites out of fields and collected them and built the reed bed with Harry Cogan and Marty Clark and a couple of other people back in the day. That was certainly a cost saving. I'm not going to depend on either Emily or Jean to do that. Maybe Joel, I don't know. But there is a change in when we got to Brian was connected with the county, but he was not connected with the sewer system. The advantage that we got from him was he found this.
He chased down this feasibility study, the funding to
and
give
got
us
the
the
80,000 for us to get this process started. I spent time with, when I came on, we just had the Small Cities Grant that was written under Mark's administration, and Tom had the job of working with Crawford and Associates to implement what was supposed to be 600 feet along Montgomery Street. And what happened to us was we ran into a cistern that was under the Lasher garage.
Yep.
That cost us an extra, out of that $600,000, we had to spend $125,000 emptying that cistern of motor oil and filling it with sand. I do not know if Dutchess County would do the same thing, or if they would have looked at more maps and known that that cistern was there. Our mistake was we didn't ask Claude Potts. And that was the fun in the village when I first started, was that there was a lot of this, we'll do it ourselves. So I was a little reluctant when we first entered into this project. I was reluctant to lose control. I was reluctant to leave the decision of whether it would be a grant or a zero interest rate bond to Dutchess County. I thought we had more skin in the game to get the grant if we were doing it. But I knew that we weren't going to be building the reed bed with our own shovels in the future. And what I've come to, it's partly with meeting with these people from Dutchess County, and Bridget, who runs this, has created a very professional shop. And also realizing that we have a lot of utilities. We have learned that those utilities are usually pretty well governed. We mutter about their rates periodically, but I don't know about you, but I get electricity from Central Hudson, and I have about as much control over them through my vote as you all do. But they are a reasonably professional outfit. They're well capitalized. Dutchess County's wastewater authority appears to be, it's small. It's still pretty small, but they're very professional. They've got good resources. I do think they will try to get the funds as cheaply as possible for us. And they have the grant writers and the people who understand who you go to at the Clean Water Authority, et cetera, to get those monies. All of those monies are governed. If they're federal monies, then the way you bid it out, the criteria are all at the federal level. So I think they will be done well.
And on that note, we have here copies. This is a list of every grant, subsidized loan, and zero interest loan that the authority has chased down in one since 1995, so you can pick one up on your way out and have a look to see where they have gone for funding to offset rates. Louise, you had your hand up.
What response have you gotten back from the landowners who have the private wells? How do they feel about this and that the wastewater authority would take over the water rights and have right of ways?
You mean like Trezza?
I had a long talk with Al Trezza this morning.
Have they responded back? Do you have a response back from the landowners who have the wells for the village?
He said, if the Water and Wastewater Authority takes it over, will I be dealing with them? And I said, yes. And he said, we have to do, the village needs to do what it needs to do, so.
Yeah, and we own the Potts wells. The rest of the wells are village owned.
Yeah, but they would have the rights to the water, because that's what the woman said at the second meeting.
But they have
No,
to have
it's not
they have to hold the
accurate.
rights to the water to administer that.
So we give up that right, which is ours, and which is individuals, in a certain sense, because then they have control over it.
You can still drop a well in your backyard and that's your water, even if the authority's here.
Yeah, but that woman from the Waste Authority explained the whole thing at the second meeting.
It's not water rights like out west here in New York State. It doesn't
It's
work that way.
whoever is administering the system needs to have the authority to operate within those wells, the rights, the water that's coming out. That's part of the commodity that's.
To what she was saying about the water rights.
Right, but they're not gonna take they're not gonna take the water from these wells and sell it
Elsewhere.
elsewhere. It is all
It's
part
But
of
they have
the
control
system.
over the water where we do not have control over
It'll
the
be,
water.
it'll be water for this district.
Right.
They have control over the water to
Yes, and
administer
we would
those
be the
rights
first
within
premier
this
village
district.
because they don't have any other villages.
But they're gonna have more, I guarantee you. Tivoli will be the first perhaps, but we will not be the last community around here to look at this. Our stuff has been so shot and we've been behind, so we're coming to the authority maybe sooner than other communities. But I do believe that there will be other communities in the next decade who look to the professionals to handle stuff that is bigger and scarier than they can deal with.
Well, I feel we're the stewards of our water and our sewer, which was given to us over Red Hook, because they do not have sewer. And they look at us as a better community because of it, because of the cost it would be to the people in Red Hook. And I think we should take care of what we have and work on it ourselves incrementally over time, because the cost may increase a little bit over time, but the wastewater authority, that's a question mark. We don't know what the increase of cost will be over time. They can speculate and say in 10 years it's going to be X amount, but we do not know in the future what the cost is for equipment, supplies, materials. We don't know manpower, labor, and that. We don't know that. That's a question mark, where we know that if we put out X amount of money as a bond or whatever we float or whatever we do for the community, we know that's a set amount.
Well, there's a certain amount of uncertainty in everything, right? But we do have really good
Of course, but these are
information
the two
going.
things we need to weigh out, because we're, as taxpayers paying for this.
Right, but also, we don't know, I mean, there could be a leak going on right now. Then we have to drop another 15 grand on.
You know, Jimmy's cursing.
You know,
like,
I know.
right? In
Jimmy's
his head
totally
right now?
doing his
That's the way it is.
Yeah, there's.
That's the way
Right,
life
so there is
is.
uncertainty,
That's right.
no,
So
we can't
there's-
project out 10 years, but we know, based on these reports, they were done by a super, qualified firm. We know what the problem is. We know what we need to do.
And that's the first step in fixing it, right?
Pete? I know Pete wants to talk more. You always want to talk more. What do you got?
I was just going to say, we have all the same uncertainties. In fact, we probably have more. And I think that actually doing it incrementally would maybe keep some costs down on the front end, but at the end of the day, it's probably going to cost more because it's going to be a start and stop sort of situation instead of ripping off the Band-Aid and just doing it. Just logistically, it doesn't make sense that incrementally it would be.
Just to address that, you turn around and you have like CT mail, they've been in business, like I said, they've been doing the village right up for over 30 years. Those are the engineering groups that you get in here to lay the pipe. They're the ones responsible for putting it. You're gonna have to get the engineers in, whether the village of Tivoli does it or the authority does it. You're still gonna have to have an engineering group.
Of course.
And do the whole system.
Yeah, sure.
And what I'm saying is that you're better off if you do it as the village doing it. Red Hook's been doing it for a long, long period of time with these guys. And
Red Hook's also bigger than us.
well, yeah, I understand that.
We got another comment.
Financially, what you were talking about makes so much sense, because see, the thing is, if, I know it's like the band, you know, you pay it all up front, 0% interest, we know what the cost is gonna be in today's dollars. If you wait 10 years, you're gonna be paying in inflation dollars of 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So incrementally, it's gonna be a lot more expensive, because you're gonna be buying it with those dollars, those days, not today's dollars.
Yeah.
So from a financial point of view, if someone is willing to give you the money at 0% interest,
but that's not
and you get all
guaranteed.
the stuff now,
That's not
and you pay it
guaranteed.
over 30 years, that's a better deal.
That's not
There's someone
guaranteed.
who would lend us the money, that's for sure. Whether they'll give it to us, that's another.
Well, the
story.
Well,
state,
that's what I meant, lend us the money, 30 years, zero,
The state's
well, they're
been
giving it
trying
to you,
to
but they're doing it for 30 years.
Yeah.
the state's been trying to give money away for years.
But how, I mean, but it's not as easy as just calling them up and saying, hey, give us $9.5 million. I mean, if it was that easy, we would have taken care of this a long time ago.
And before I get Ken, I also want to put this in context. I mean, if you open a newspaper, if anyone does anymore, if you go online and look at the newspaper, we are competing with communities all across New York State and all across the country. Many communities are in the same boat here.
Or
where
worse.
This country has, or
Right.
worse.
Yeah.
So,
So-
as bad as our need is, and we might get in line with the state, revolving clean drinking fund, there might be several communities worse off, and they're gonna get the money first,
I think it's important to recognize different parameters as well. We are competing, fantastic that Red Hook won millions of dollars for this, but their project, the scope of their project is different as well, and that gives them a different weight. But we'd be competing for funds coming from the same pot, essentially. There are different grants that we can apply for, but putting a new sewer system in versus repairing an existing sewer system
Is a higher priority.
is,
You don't need a
exactly,
new
so
sewer
we
system.
may not be weighted, we feel our need is pressing, but when those grant applications are being evaluated, that's just one of many factors that can impact it, the scope of the project, what is the intended outcome there? What have you got to start with and what's your finish point?
It's gonna be that way for the authority too.
Ken?
Sure is.
I want to echo just two things I think they're important. No one wants to hear this, but including me, but we probably weren't paying what we should have been paying for many years. Like, in other words, we got a discount for this deferred maintenance. We, not just the mayors, but everybody in this village was happy to just let this go over our heads. We were very happy to get we subsidized ourselves for the future, right? Right? That's what we did. And we have to face it. And maybe we gave up control of this water system a long time ago by not standing up and saying, hey, look, this bill, I'm glad to be paying this low bill, but, shouldn't we be putting a reserve fund? Shouldn't we be doing that? Nobody did that. And so, I want to echo that lady who's left too. This was a hard thing to take on. Nobody's wanted to take it on. And I want to appreciate you for taking it on, because it's not fun. And everyone's going to yell at you, and everyone's going to be pissed off, and no one wants to pay the higher bill. But we're going to pay a higher bill anyway, whether we run it or the agency runs it too, so that's another issue.
I don't think that you can charge too high a rate. According, the state watches your water and your sewer, what you're charging the residents, and they don't want you to be collecting all this extra money.
Well, but let's say there was
That's probably, I remember that as one of the major things.
But let's say there was something we should have done that we didn't do.
Yes.
And we let it go.
And it's even more subtle and probably difficult than, Tom points that out, that's true. You can't have these giant reserves sitting around What you would have had to have done is have had ratepayers or governments say, you know what? It's time to go fix this thing that's not broken yet. And to have the foresight to do that, the awareness to know the triage of all these components, and get the political support to go fix something that's not broken.
Right.
When there are other things that are broken that people say, no, fix that, that's actually broken now. How hard is that? That's hard. That's very hard. And I think it's not just about how much money were we putting aside. It was about the awareness and the dedication to do this stuff that hasn't come yet. That's hard for everybody. And an institution whose sole purpose is that has an advantage over us who are going to put out whatever fire is in front of us that day. You know? Because things that aren't even on fire yet, you don't get to right away. But that's what would have had to have happened. It's even more subtle. It's just the management and the administration, not just the money we didn't put in. We didn't see the projects and go do them.
And maybe like the difference between somebody who's managing a fleet, you know, they're professional fleet managers of cars, and they know, okay, we got to change the oil. You got your own car, I'll go another 1,000 miles on it, I'll go another 2,000. Oh, I'm supposed to do the spark plug? No, they're good enough, you know, and it's just a difference of attitude. And I think we've gotten, I'm not going to say we got a free ride because we paid our bills and everything, but we got a discount. We took the discount against the people of the future. We're now the people of the future.
We deferred maintenance.
Deferred maintenance is an expensive thing for the people that end up paying the bill, and we're the ones, but we did get the 20 years of not paying, so it's...
But who guarantees the authority is going to do that?
But who guarantees that we have the capacity to
We
do it?
have, we know what we're
But we
going to
haven't done it.
We do have evidence of how we do it, which is we don't.
Well, that's not, and it's not all on the mayor. You have a board of trustees,
Absolutely.
and you have the, I'm not talking about you guys at this moment. No, honestly.
Anyway.
No, there's board of trustees that were here way back with the mayors. There was different people here that ran the village, and they didn't do it either. So it's just not the mayors themselves.
Okay, trustees too.
It's everybody here.
And I think Ken's point,
But also, yeah, I never walked
including
into
the
Tom's
users,
office
you know?
and said, by God, I want this thing fixed,
Yeah,
I'll pay any
our
price,
track
just do it. I
record.
never did that.
Our
Right.
track
But I'm
record
also
is
going to
not good.
ask, you know, you're asking how can we be assured that the water authority will actually step up and do this? And while I agree there's no guarantee, much like there's no guarantee from a municipal standpoint, because we don't know who the mayor's going to be. But what we
Well, that's a
do
better chance
have
because
in
they gotta be
terms
elected.
of the water authority is their reputation and their track record. It's not like we're going and
Their
just
reputation's
picking a
not
company.
That reputation is not that good.
if you want to know about the water authority, you know, go down to Hyde Park, ask somebody, go contact the supervisor, go to these subdivisions that Jean Ann was referring to, talk to some people. I mean, we brought in the supervisor of Hyde Park to talk to us, and you know, she said, look, when I took that job, 60% of my time was water. And she did have the experience of someone coming in and leaving some keys and saying, you know, our homeowners association's out, you're the municipality, you just got this failing water system, now it's your problem. She's been happy. And she has not said that rates went through the roof or were crazy, that they were adjusted to what they needed to be to do the capital projects and then maintain good maintenance after that. But go ask her, go talk to people down there, don't take my word for it.
You know, I
But
think, don't
when
forget,
she
we live
came-
here too. We don't want to hand this over to
Well,
a party that's not going to.
Right now, I'm just gonna make a comment, be my last comment. You guys already decided it's gonna go to the authority. Plain and simple.
No, I disagree with there, Vince.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think
I'm
that
here,
we'd be
I was
sitting here
asked what my
having this
opinion
forum
was,
if we
and I
had
stated
made a
it, we've all
decision.
stated it. The decision isn't even in our hands, Vince.
It's in our hands.
It's in our hands, because you can force a vote, and the village will decide. And I'm thrilled at that, because I don't want this resting on just our heads. I'm glad that ultimately it's gonna be up to everyone, and it should be, you know?
It's gonna go right. to
So
the authority.
whether we had decided or not is actually not relevant, you know? I've been living with this, I was asked my opinion. I think they can do a better job, and we're more likely to get reliable, dependable water and sewer service than we will from the village government. And to really support that point, We've had it for 80 years, and look where we got.
And it's we, it's not the boards, it's not just mayors, it's everybody, we're all adults. We all know we need water, you know, we didn't pay any attention to it, and now we gotta pay the bill. Or at least, you know, we gotta.
I respect everything you've said, and you know how I feel about everything. I don't want you to sell yourself short about what's been going on. I mean, you've got the village board in Rhinebeck that's undertaking this, and is their board a different chemistry than yours? Are their problems less than what you have? Or are they undertaking this, you know, this project that they're doing is replacing water pipes? The same thing, century-old infrastructure. Don't sell yourself short. You are a board, you do a great job at what you do. You're not expected to do this project on your own. You would have to hire out, just like everybody, like the authority would. They have to hire an engineer. You have to hire, bid it out to be done. Overseeing the project is overwhelming.
I suspect that if we did that, it would add $75,000 to $100,000 annually to
Well,
the
you can't do
cost.
it without it.
Right, but
I guess what, I mean, it comes down to is that well, not what it comes down to, but one thing to consider is that some of those things that we would need to outsource, the authority wouldn't. So there's an advantage to them in that regard, things like grant writers, if we're chasing down
Right.
funding.
Right, but you hire grant writers.
Sure.
And-
The
and
authority,
if you want
however, the
grants,
figures
you're
that
gonna
we
hire
put out for
grant
them to take it over, they have grant writers on
Right.
staff, so it's part of the administration of the system.
Gentleman in the back corner here.
But the authority has to pay people to do the work too, right? So that's included in our quarterly billing. I understand that it's a not-for-profit, but people who work there have to get paid.
Yep.
So incorporated into our billing is going to be the cost associated with that maintenance labor. What would the difference in cost be for the village to hire somebody whose specific responsibility would be to oversee the operations of the water district versus the cost that the authority charges included in their monthly billing?
That's what we're guessing at, is this, what Susan just,
it would add, I would think, just based on what we paid our engineer when we were seeking these grants ourselves, and when we were getting, one year we got 600,000, another year 150, another 250. So it would have taken us a long time to get up to $9.5 million. And we were probably spending $60,000 to $75,000 on the engineer who was doing the writing for those grants.
But I'm talking about maintenance going forward.
Well, that would be part of the capital planning and all of that.
Handled it, or the authority handles it.
So for us to do the system and then hire an operator, you mean?
An operator to oversee, like a super gym.
Right.
Like a guy who does that, whose job is that? Would it save us money on a quarterly billing basis?
It would add to it.
It would add to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you all for all the hard work that you've done doing this. I came in with not having been exposed to this, and I'm sure like many, I came in with the I don't want to give up anything thing, but after this, it was very, very educational, very well put together, and I love the exchange. I am totally on board with, I think that it's the right decision, I agree with you, to move it over because of the infrastructure that they have in place with all, 23 employees as an example, just on the administrative side versus even if we hired another engineer, when he gets sick, who's going to do his job? You follow what I'm saying? It's a utility company.
Right.
It's like your electric
But
company.
those 23 guys are getting paid from our bill.
Well, not from our building only.
From all the billings, from all the
the other
systems.
thing, whereas our system
Their,
would pay for
their
us
reason
to
for
do it.
existence is like the utility company, the electric company, or anything else. Their reason for existence, and the only reason why they exist, is because there's a need for their service. Because we wouldn't, Central Hudson wouldn't exist if we didn't need electricity. So they exist because there's a need for their service to manage waste and water.
And while all of the funds to embark on these capital improvements that are, if they were handled by the Water Authority, that would be paid for and distributed within our system only. The administrative fees that the authority collects across all of their water systems is what is paying their employees. So we sort of get the benefit of all of the funds that we're raising to improve our own system, but the cost of those employees is spread out over all of the different water districts that the authority is handling.
One more question, and I promise this will be the last. Sure. If they're non-for-profit, you would figure that if they're performing the service and they don't have, as Joel said, dividends to pay to shareholders or anything like that, and they're covering their costs and employing who they need to employ and everybody's making a living, why are they so well capitalized? Why is there so much profit and money in the bank, as Susan said earlier, that they're financially secure? How would that profit be derived, that capitalization come to be, if they weren't somehow in it for money, in it to turn a profit?
Do we know how much money they have on hand? I don't know.
No.
But
They have the human capital, the experience. They have to go out and help borrow the capital. They don't have their own pool of capital.
It's not like they're gonna just take the $9 million and hand it over.
Earlier that's what you were.
No.
I think she meant personnel, expertise, capital in a broader sense than just.
And they're going to apply for grants, and they have more expertise to do that. So their capital is going to come through grants or through getting a loan based on us paying back that loan.
Yeah, they're paid like public servants. You know, that's civil servants. That's who they are.
Sorry.
You know, all this money laying around.
No.
So they have a board, right? You can actually join their board and be on their board and.
Yeah, they have a board of 5. Let's see, 2 are appointed by the executive, 2 are appointed by the legislature, and the 5th is jointly appointed by the legislature and the executive. Our former mayor, as Alex pointed out. Yes, Alex?
Not to believe it. But to Karen's point, okay, so Rhinebeck Village is going their own way. The problem with the thing that our problem is that all $9.5 million should have been done yesterday. That's what makes it difficult for us to do it ourselves. For Rhinebeck, is that the same problem?
I gotta tell you, I've had my head
so
full
much
of
up
Tivoli, and I'm not so up on what's happening in the village of Rhinebeck. I'm not.
Okay, so I would suspect.
And the village of Red Hook is developing a new system.
Red Hook is the new
So
system.
theirs is not
Right.
different.
I would suspect that Rhinebeck doesn't have as bad of problems as we have. So therefore, they can take more time and manage it themselves.
They also probably have a much bigger staff. They're a much larger municipality.
The same issues, but not the huge one.
Another, Kathy?
I just want to say I have such appreciation for the amount of work that each of you have put into this topic, this consideration. I have appreciation for that activity, and I have trust in the wisdom that each of you have come, and I'm asking you to please come to a concerted decision as soon as you're reasonably comfortable in doing so. I would appreciate your acting sooner than later.
Thanks, folks. Tim, and then before we go to Tim, which I think can be the last comment, thank you all for coming. This is really important, as you know. While we've expressed sort of our lean, it's not over, and also, even if we had all made up our minds a year ago, it's not in our control. So pay attention, we've got nothing to hide from you. We're gonna keep you up to date as to our thinking and whenever we make this decision. And even once we do, you know, it belongs to all of us, this decision, this responsibility, and so thanks for coming, and it's not over. And if you know other people who couldn't come tonight, we can get emails, they can come to the next board meeting. Please stay engaged, I guess is what I'm saying. Thank you for being engaged, and please stay engaged. Tim.
I just want to make one comment on, this can be kind of a hard decision following up on the hard decision, potentially, if you do decide to go with the county, and that's the personnel issue. And I kind of get the impression you're kind of looking at like free money with the whole personnel thing and having lots of plans for what you can do with them. And I think it's worth considering on the budget line items there that reducing personnel might be the appropriate thing to do for village taxes, given that our taxes are going up, or our water and sewer rates are going up. Maybe we can get a little savings on our village budget.
I just didn't follow your use of free money. I'm not sure where that fits in.
But
because
free labor, available labor to do other things. You got all these other jobs planned out that would be great, but that means we're spending more overall.
I see what you're saying. Thank you for the point, and we'll keep it in mind. I will just, not to get too nuanced and heady on the last thought of the evening, but all of Jim's salary, which is a significant salary, he's been here 35 years, comes out of the water and sewer lines. It's not in the general fund.
Yeah.
So he might have to come back into the general fund, and we're gonna have to find his salary. So it's actually, I think, the reverse of what you were suggesting, that
Well, no, I guess that's exactly what I'm suggesting, is that you're saying not only is our water rate going to go up, but our village taxes are going to go up because you want to keep Jim on the payroll.
well, unless we can find a way, other, a way to
Or
fit him in.
unless he
without-
goes and works for the authority, I mean,
Right.
it's too big a decision to be considering one individual's
Oh, absolutely.
job.
And, he has worked 35 years, and I hope he
He's not gonna
stays
be around
healthy for a
forever.
very long time, but it's not gonna be forever.
One thing you gotta consider, just talking about Jimmy, he's a licensed operator. Okay, you gotta go take a test, go to school, take a test to operate the system for the water and the sewers. Has the village board tried to get one of the other guys that work for the village to go for his license, or both of them need to go for the
Yeah,
license?
Cody's got his first one, and the training's come around, and he's been going, yes.
Yeah, Cody is.
Okay, so that's
We
a
have a
backup.
backup. Yeah.
It's a backup, okay.
All right, thank you all very much for coming.